Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the jerk off who picked Dylan Butka to defeat Cesar Almeida. And I will talk about that fight in a few minutes, but I'm going to start here talking about the main event of UFC Fight Night 240, Allen versus Curtis 2. And Chris Curtis and Brendan Allen both performed very well, I thought. This was an excellent main event. I thought it was competitive to the point where it was settled in the final 5 seconds or whatever. And I still don't know what the fuck happened there, to be honest. I was sure watching it live that it was a body shot, but I know Curtis tore his hamstring, and I think he tore it earlier in the fight. I think I read second round or whatever, but I know in the end that's what he said. It all just came crumbling down, and whatever, where it looked like a body shot, it was his leg giving out or whatever. But regardless, I think Brendan Allen should have won the fight. I think it was very close, but it would have been a bad decision if it went to Chris Curtis. Brendan Allen, while he wasn't as dominant on the ground as he was against other fighters, he still got Chris Curtis down and got 45 seconds at least of valuable control, it seemed like, in every single round. And he had a few good submission attempts, but nothing too deep. And Brendan Allen was not discouraged when Chris Curtis kept exploding out. After that happened in the second round, I was just like, all right, he's done with that. Now let's see what happens in the championship rounds or whatever, which I know round 3 is in a championship round, but he exceeded my expectations. And I know he's fighting a guy on short notice and whatever the fuck, but still, Brendan Allen kept getting Chris Curtis down as one of the tougher guys to get down and kept controlling him, and the control got better, especially in round 5. It was at its best. And I thought that was very impressive for Brendan Allen. But Chris Curtis, I mean, he took this fight on very short notice, or fairly short notice, and he went 5 hard rounds in a losing effort and gave a title contender, maybe right now, Brendan Allen, a hell of a fight, a very tough, razor thin fight. So both guys, their stock jumped with this fight. And I think Brendan Allen, despite not getting the finish, which he's a man who gets a lot of finishes, and this is one of the more rare decisions for him, I think this was extra impressive because I considered Chris Curtis to be kind of like his, whatever you call it, uh, antidote or whatever, the anti Brendan Allen. I thought Brendan Allen would have trouble with just the natural gifts of Chris Curtis, being a tough guy to wrangle, tough guy to control, and impossible guy to finish, even though he's been knocked out once and submitted once, whatever. But Chris Curtis at 36, 37 or whatever still looked phenomenal, and he stood tall against Brendan Allen, who, again, is one of the very best middleweights on the planet, and I think he could be fighting for a title next. I know he won't be, but if something were to happen with Israel or Drakus or whatever, he could be thrown into a pay-per-view main event as long as there's a title on the line. But he's still got big fights coming up next. I would think it's going to be Sean Strickland, although I can't say if it'll be in the UFC octagon or a boxing ring. But probably the octagon. I think they get Sean Strickland back in there, and he and Brendan Allen thrown down for 5 rounds would be fucking amazing. So good things coming for Brendan Allen. And for Chris Curtis, he has to heal up and whatever, but he looked really, really good here under some shitty circumstances. And I think his stock only goes up with this loss. So he'll have a big fight coming up. The co-main event, Damon Jackson beat Alexander Hernandez. This was another close fight, but like pretty much like a 3-round version of the main event where Damon Jackson should have won, and I'm glad the decision went his way. I thought he definitely should have won the fight, but it was still close enough. And Hernandez, despite missing weight, which is another strike against his fucking discipline or whatever, he looked good in the end when I expected him to crumble. I thought if they're in round 3 and it's a competitive fight and Damon Jackson can control him and, all that, I thought he's not going to last. And he did last. And I thought that was very impressive, but not impressive enough. Again, Damon Jackson, a guy that I thought he should have beaten. Damon Jackson took away that danger from Hernandez. Hernandez wasn't the bully from the beginning like I expected. And in the end, Alexander Hernandez didn't have what it takes to get Damon Jackson out of there, really turn the fight around in the second half of the fight. So great win for Damon Jackson. And for Hernandez, this was a perhaps undeserving co-main event slot, even though when the cards are dog shit, I could step in and be the fucking co-main event. But he didn't make the most of it. Another tough loss for Hernandez, uh, who's been up and down, but certainly down in the UFC. Jose Chepe Mariscal defeated Morgan Charrier. This was a razor thin fight. I bet on Morgan, so I scored it for him. But I still think, it's definitely not a bad decision. And I thought in the end, Chepe Mariscal winning scrambles gave himself a good shot at winning a decision, especially in round three, winning those scrambles. And that's what happened. And he was able to scramble his way to a split decision victory. Chepe, despite me picking against him, he is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. And now that I've made peace with the losing the money, I can say I'm very happy he won this fight. Without the investment, I would have preferred Chepe Mariscal to win this fight just because the story keeps going. Now he's 3-0, and he's beaten some three really good fighters, or at least two of them. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But he's definitely got a lot of momentum, and the hype keeps going with Chepe Mariscal. I love when a guy, even like Morgan Charrier or Chepe, these guys that are considered, some fans that don't know shit about fighting will call them like journeymen or whatever because they've got a bunch of losses. But they're when you look at their records, both those guys have only been beaten by monsters, and they've both beaten monsters, and they both belong in the UFC. And here, Chepe Mariscal goes 3-0, and for Morgan Charrier, this was another tight, tough decision loss for him, like all of his other losses. But I think this one, whatever. It was really close, and Chepe Mariscal isn't done climbing, so might even get better with age before it gets worse. Ignacio Bahamondes beat Christos Yagos, got him out of there with a head kick. This was very impressive. I thought Yagos, very tough to knock out. He's only been knocked out twice. Arman Sarukian and Josh Emmett. Those are two fucking monsters. And I thought Ignacio definitely had a striking advantage, and I've seen his kicks dictate the fight like I predicted them to, but I didn't think he would knock him out like this. And he got it done pretty quickly, 3 minutes into the fight. And yeah, beautiful finisher, Ignacio Bahamondes. Not as pretty as some of his other finishes, but yeah, this guy, he is really fucking talented. And if you can't slow the fight down, really, if you can't rip him to the mat, you're in trouble. He's a fucking problem, and he's only becoming more dangerous on the ground. Tough guy to control, really good scrambly fighter, and again, got his first submission in the third round in the UFC last year. So the hype's there with Bahamondes, and this only reinforces it. And for Yagos, this was a really tough loss. He's a guy who's had plenty of them, but yeah, tough loss. Charlie Campbell beat Trevor Peek by unanimous decision. Trevor Peek wasn't able to take over this fight. I thought Charlie Campbell, who I thought Charlie Campbell was about to let Trevor Peek take the momentum and start, just taking over the fight with a barrage. Trevor Peek runs at you like fucking Vitor Belfort sometimes and just goes for it. But Charlie Campbell had more skills, and he was able to slow the fight down and have some good control over Trevor Peek on the ground. And it was just another fight where Trevor Peek was kind of exposed as a limited raw fighter. This was one that I got wrong. I knew Trevor was a raw fighter, but I thought he was going to be able to insist on making this a brawl, and he just wasn't. Tough loss for Peek, who is a limited guy, but still excitement and has value on UFC cards moving forward. But you can definitely say the same for Charlie Campbell, who's 2-0, a much cleaner fighter. And hey, you know what? He ate some shots here, and that main doubt I have in him, his chin, some of that doubt was alleviated here because he definitely took some offense from Trevor Peek, but he took it well and largely dictated this fight. And a very clean fighter, Charlie Camp. I'm sure he's not a dirty fighter, but I mean, he's a very clean striker. It's fun watching him fight. And Alex Morono beat Court McGee. This was a fight that I expected to end. I thought Court McGee was going to get knocked out, but I still thought Alex Morono, there's a chance he would win a decision as well, just because that would have been his primary path to victory, or anybody's path to victory over Court McGee before his last two knockout losses. Court's like he was impossible to finish. I know Santiago Ponzinibbio got him out of there, but Court McGee, who was, in my opinion, famously durable, suddenly is not, and here his chin held up, and Alex Morono definitely tagged him. Morono's not the most imposing fighter physically. I don't know why I'm doing this, but Morono is quick and deceptively powerful, and McGee held up strong and made it a close enough fight. But still, without chins and health being the story of the fight, Morono was faster, much faster, and Court McGee was, the slower zombie chasing after him. Still made a good fight out of it, but he wasn't able to keep up with the human Alex Morono. So not a bad loss for McGee altogether, but still another loss. And I don't know what that means for him. I don't know what his contract situation is. But for Morono, he's the one that's definitely got more of a future in the UFC. And this was another hard-earned victory. Speaking of which, Lucas Dreschke. Lucas Dreschke defeated Walter Walker by unanimous decision. That was a really tight fight. Could have gone either way. I did think Walter Walker was able to have a lot of control, but Dreschke kept making a fight out of it, and he was working hard in round 3, scrambling out, even though, again, Walter got on top of him and whatever. But Dreschke definitely made the most of the moments when he wasn't being smothered. And Walter Walker, I don't know what the control time is for him or whatever, but he's always good for control time, it seems like. And that's been the difference in the majority of his victories. But he still is a guy that if you're able to get up multiple times, even if he has that good control in a fight, it's going to reduce him optically to this guy who's just desperately clinging to you and trying to slow the fight down. And judges don't respect that. They just don't. A judge sees that and goes, oh, this guy's trying not to fight. This guy's doing more damage. And you can say, yeah, but he had fucking 14 minutes of control time. Yeah, but those 20 seconds that his opponent had in each round really seemed to count. So that's going to work against him in the future, but it already worked against him here in his UFC debut. A fight that definitely you could argue he won, but definitely you couldn't argue that he was trying to make it exciting. And Lucas Dreschke took it to him when he could and walked away with a hard-earned decision victory. Lucas Dreschke's a guy who, he's a big, tall guy, but when he's put against some bigger heavyweights, he can play the matador. And I don't want to say like he did it to perfection here, because he definitely was controlled a good amount, but he can play the matador and he can be the faster guy on the feet, and he made that happen for him here. Norma Dumont beat Jermaine Durandamy. This was a pretty close fight, but I thought a clear victory for Norma. Norma was able to rip Jermaine Durandamy to the mat. Caught a kick, I believe, early, but then ripped her to the mat a few times from the clinch. Double legged her, I believe, in round 3. And that was the difference maker. She got a big ass on top of her, and Jermaine Durandamy, little older, slower, and whatever the fuck, was pinned. So Norma Dumont made control the story of this fight, and she controlled Jermaine Durandamy. With the context, it's not the greatest win, but when you look back, at her record after the context kind of disappears, it's a win over a champion and one of the better female fighters in UFC history, which is pretty short as far as females go. It's only been 11 years, but Jermaine Durandamy, she's been an excellent fighter. The only girl to beat her in the UFC was Amanda Nunes twice. But Norma Dumont got it done here. Again, 40 years old, 4-year layoff. She had the flu. She stubbed her toe. I'm aware of all of it. But Norma still outperformed her here and got a win over a champion. Victor Hugo Silva beat Pedro Falcao. This was a fight that I did not even know was happening. I saw the weigh-ins Friday night. I was like, what the fuck? But Pedro Falcao stepped in on short notice to replace Haile Alatang. and gave a good account of himself. But I still thought Victor Hugo Silva definitely won the fight. I thought he landed the better strikes, and I thought, despite being pressured, and he was pressured, he was able to handle it, largely neutralize Pedro Falcao, reduce him to just pressure. And the damage was on Victor Hugo Silva's side. And also, in the end, I thought he was doing better down the stretch. I thought, Pedro had his better moments early. But not the dynamic finish, not the dynamic fight I would have expected from Victor Hugo Silva, in a victory. But he won with a hard-earned decision, and that's a good look too, winning like that in the UFC. And for Pedro, stepped in on fucking 2 days' notice, and yeah, he took it to him and looked good enough. He'll get another shot. Speaking of looking good enough, Jean Matsumoto submitted Dan Argueta with 1 second left in round two. This was one that I got wrong, and I definitely burnt some money on Dan Argueta. I thought Dan Argueta, I thought Dan was fighting the fight I expected him to. And I did say, I believe, he seems impossibly durable. And I think even moving forward, I'd be very surprised if anybody finishes him. But Jean Matsumoto was able to finish him. I thought Jean hit him with a lot of great strikes, and Dan looked vulnerable on the feet, but I didn't think he hurt him at all. And I thought that was discouraging. And Dan kept ripping him to the mat. And then he hit him with like plan C or D or E or whatever and got a beautiful guillotine in the final seconds. And Dan Argueta, I think, tapped and then tried to keep, like, he didn't try to keep fighting. He was tapped and half out, and then he thought he was still fighting. It was just, he was fucked up there. But I do believe it was a legit tap. Regardless, I think he showed in the immediate aftermath that the fight should have been stopped, anyway, regardless of a tap or not. But Jean Matsumoto showed he had that danger. That guillotine was something that I recognized before the fight. I think I even said in the pre-fight video, like, oh, he's got to watch out for the guillotine or whatever. But uh, he got it deep into round two after 10 minutes of fighting and some of the most exhausting fighting I've ever seen. That fight was tiring to watch. They just kept going, and they both ripped each other to the mat too, which was very impressive for Jean. I don't. He might add more takedowns. I don't even know, but Dan was definitely bullying him and having better control. But that was just fucking grueling. Tough to watch, as tough as this is to listen to, I'm sure, because the sound of my own voice, I must be fucking exhausted. But anyway, great win for Jean Matsumoto. I think it was an impressive win against anybody, but against a guy like Dan Argueta, who I think will prove to be as durable as I expect him to, this win and in particular finish was an incredible debut for Jean Matsumoto. And then Cesar Almeida beat Dylan Butka by TKO in round two. This was kind of like that fight, Jean Matsumoto versus Dan Argueta. But, a little different, of course, and a different finish. But I thought Dylan was in his face. Dylan was hitting some beautiful takedowns and some sloppy takedowns, too. He shot one from, like, way across the octagon, but he still ended up getting it. And I thought that's the type of fight where I'm aware guys can make the wrestler exhausted, but here with that takedown prowess, especially early, I thought Cesar Almeida would be the one fading. And he just kept working. The guy Cesar kept working, and he kept being ripped to the mat and being controlled, but he kept working and working. And then in round two, once they were in the clinch, I think he realized this guy's not going to take me down anymore, and he started hurting him, took over the fight, and TKO'd him. Excellent debut for Cesar Almeida. That is a much better debut than him knocking some guy out like Rebellis Despain or whatever. Much better type of debut. Getting tested, getting taken down, kind of getting his ass kicked a little bit, and then taming the wrestler and TKOing him in the middle of the fight. Fucking awesome debut. And for Dylan Butka, I think his wrestling was there for him early, and he could definitely give a better performance. But yeah, he faded here. I think he faded. Cesar Almeida looked like a difficult guy to control, but he had his moments, and he kind of let the fight slip away a little bit. But I'm sure he'll get another shot in the UFC. Nora Cornale TKO'd Melissa Mullins. So that is her name. Melissa Mullins is her name officially, and this was a beautiful finish from Nora Cornale. I thought the fight was going Melissa's way early, taking her down and controlling her. And I have to, did she mount her? I think she mounted her. But either way, I think she mounted her. And then Nora Cornale exploded from the bottom, as she's done in the past. And in round two, Nora, after being taken down again, I think early in round two, I have to rewatch the fucking fight, kneed her in the body and then took over, kicked her in the head a few times as she was ready to collapse from the body shot, and just put her away with an amazing amount of violence, all in like a 5 second window. It was a beautiful finish from Nora Cornale down the stretch in the second half of the fight, technically, and against a girl that was out grappling her, and I thought would have been out grappling her later, as for how the first half of the fight went. So Nora Cornale came through in a big way. Both girls missed weight, which I have to say here, I did actually bet on both girls winning by TKO in rounds 2 and 3 after they missed weight, just because gives me more doubt in the cardio, and that proved to be true here. I don't know but that produced a round two finish anyway. It wasn't so much the cardio; it was the knee to the body, straight up. But Melissa Dixon or Melissa Mullins missed weight and got finished. Nora Cornale, she missed weight as well, and she got a finish victory. So I guess both girls, it's a little bit of a stain and they have to make weight, but they still gave us an excellent fight. And Nora Canale gave us an excellent win. She's the first girl to beat Melissa Dixon and the first girl to finish her because she was beaten 4 times as an amateur, but all by decision. But excellent win for Nora, and for Melissa Mullins or Dixon or whatever. Really shitty weekend altogether, missing weight and getting put away like that. So that was the event. Some ups and downs for MMA Al Dente, and some ups and downs for Chris Curtis and Brendan Allen. Again, fucking main event was awesome. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.